to this lecture from our new guest, Vladimir Gellman. He's presenting to us a talk about temptation and constraints of authoritarian modernization in Russia. Professor Gellman works at the St. Petersburg Local University in St. Petersburg, one of the two newly founded universities after 1990, and since a while also at the well-known Authoritarian of the university in Finland. Again, Mr. Gellman is, I think, one of the most well-known political scientists, I would say, in Western context. So he has published a lot, plenty of articles, papers on modernization of authoritarianism, regime change, neo-patrimonialism, crony capitalism, the role of informal institutions, informality, informal institutions, an often quoted paper of you. And recently he published a book, which we have already in our library, on Russia's authoritarian modernization. So I think we have we get a lecture close to this book. Actually, I've read that you have written 17 books. I'm not so sure if it's true, but that's quite impressive. And you earned the Russian Political Science Association Award. And so I think we are very happy to have you here, that you present one of your most recent research to us. And yeah, we welcome you once again, and the floor is yours.
First and foremost, let me thank Professor Bloom for the invitation, and thank you for coming to this lecture. I just need to be correct. 17 books is not the list of books written by myself. Many of these books are multi-authored volumes or edited volumes, so it's not what I done alone. And actually, the book I will be talking about is not my own product, but product of 11 scholars from Russia and from Finland, and it is resulted from a large project called Choices of Russian Modernization, funded by the Academy of Finland, and what I will be talking is based not only on my own research, but on research of my co-authors and collaborators. So, the basic concept of this book is authoritarian modernization. It became a sort of cliche, but what it means with regard to the subject of our discussion today. Authoritarian modernization is a sort of project. This is how I understand this mode of achieving of socio-economic development, progress through economic growth, through economic development under an authoritarian regime. Of course, if we will go to the distant past, we will figure out that many modernizations in the modern world were done in authoritarian settings. Many European modernizations of 18th and 19th century were conducted under authoritarian regimes. And if we will go beyond Europe, again, there is plenty of examples from Meiji era in Japan to Turkey and Atatürk. But if we will not go so deeply into the past and we'll deal with more recent history, we will realize that this project was so much attractive in various corners of the globe, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, and yet in the post-Soviet world. There are several success stories which are perceived as sort of role models when certain authoritarian regimes achieved developmental progress through rapid economic growth. And of course, examples of East Asia, most notably China over the last 4 decades, South Korea under Park Chung-hee and Ro De-woo and others are quite telling stories. But to what extent this authoritarian modernization project is relevant for present-day Russia? Some years ago, two Russian economists, well, they are no longer Russian economists, but economists of Russian origins, Ekaterina Zhuravskaya and Sergei Guriev, published an article called Why Russia is Not South Korea. And they argued that Russia cannot repeat the success story of South Korea of 1970s and 1980s, basically because the quality of institutions in Russia is much more poorer than those in South Korea. That is true, but it's only part of answer, because institutions are not, well, fallen from heaven. Institutions is a product of efforts of certain actors, and we should not pick institutions alone as the only element of success or failure of modernization, as many institutionalist economists like Ashimoglu and Robinson do. We have to have a broader look on this picture. And I would say that Russia is an interesting example of attempts of authoritarian modernization made since the very time of collapse of the Soviet Union. To put it bluntly, every time when Russia's rulers faced with listing of priorities items on their agenda to reach some sort of economic development, or rather to increase political freedoms, every time choices were made in favor of economic development at the expense of political freedoms. It was in 1991 when Russia's rulers froze existing political institutions and pursued the way to radical economic reforms. It was in the 2000 when Vladimir Putin came to power and set up his priorities. It was under presidency of Dmitry Medvedev, who openly claimed modernization as a centerpiece of his policy program. And to a certain extent, we can talk about most recent development, although it hardly be presented in terms of modernization. And I would say that the idea of authoritarian modernization has many very influential supporters. Probably the most well-known proponent of this authoritarian modernization project is Samuel Huntington, who almost half a century ago wrote a very powerful book,
called Political Order in Changing Societies. This was a sort of Bible of authoritarian modernization, because Huntington argued that if we will pursue both economic and political development simultaneously in modernizing country, it will lead to political disorder, instability and major turmoil, and therefore the best solution is to reach a certain degree of socio-economic development and postpone postpone political freedoms for a while. There are many present-day proponents like Vladimir Popov, a Russian economist who published a recent book where he praised Chinese way of economic development because it's conductive for the rule of law, and only after building a strong rule of law there is a possibility for expansion of political freedoms. Otherwise economy will be unsustainable and economic growth will be rather slow according to Popov. Certainly these arguments worth further discussion. To what extent the sequencing approach is relevant in various countries and various regions. But what about empirical evidence? Why authoritarian modernization is so popular, and why it brought so few proofs? Or like an American economist, Danny Roderick, stated that for every successful reformer like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, there are many dictators like Mobutu in Congo who brought their respective countries to decay and deterioration. And if we have a look on numbers, we will figure out that average economic growth in democracies and non-democracies is nearly the same. But the diversity among non-democracies is great, and it's an empirical proof of argument of Roderick. So what about Russia? On this landscape, Russia is neither Singapore nor Congo. We see some ups and downs in the period from 1999 till 2008. There was average economic growth 7 to 8% per annum, quite impressive by any international standards. But there were also many shortcomings, flaws, and finally after 2014 the goals of modernization were substituted by geopolitical goals, aspiring international greatness, and the very word modernization nearly disappeared from the lexicon of Russian media and Russian rulers. So how we can explain why the evidence for authoritarian modernization, both in Russia and comparatively, is quite mixed? Let's use term mixed, very mild, I would say. There are several explanations which are not country-specific. There are broader comparative explanations. One is related to the structure, to the legacy of the past, because you can't make modernization by design. Certainly every ruler, every policy reformer has to build a strategy based upon previous development, previous trajectory of socio-economic development, and certainly Soviet modernization project was well, not always conductive for rapid growth, given very distorted structure of economy, huge legacy of military-industrial production, huge social and spatial displacement of major resources and the like. There are plenty of works on this subject. Also, the quality of the state is a crucial variable, because certainly this was one of the key elements of success stories of East Asia is good quality of East Asian bureaucracy. Again, for Russia as well as for other post-Soviet countries, we observe quite the opposite tendency. To some extent, the decline of quality of the state was a result of decay of the Soviet state and its further collapse, and also troubles of post-communist transformation. But certainly quality of post-Soviet states is rather poor. But apart from structure, there are some choices made by major agents, by political actors, and we see that not all authoritarian regimes are conducive for authoritarian modernizations. Again, there are several studies which demonstrated that party-based regimes like in China or in Mexico under PRI rule are better suited for developmental goals than personalist regimes, and particularly electoral authoritarian regimes which emerged in the post-Soviet area. Electoral authoritarian regimes actually combined worst features of both democracy and authoritarianism, because they conduct meaningful elections. These elections are unfair. Need of buying loyalty of voters greatly contributed to politicization of economy and of economic policy making. And at the same time, regimes faced with threats to their survival. In case of Russia, the experience of 2011-2012 mass protests is just an illustration for that. And more specifically, with regard to authoritarian modernization project, of course, ideas and perceptions of political leaders and policymakers played decisive role in their policy choices, because certainly many efforts put by policymakers are driven by priorities of political leaders, and these priorities may change over time to more conductive or less conductive direction for modernization. So let's have a look on Russia through the prism of all these theoretical considerations, which are not much country-specific. It's a problem for many countries at the globe, basically at the middle of the world table of socio-economic development. Russia is certainly not alone. So what about basic list of structural factors of modernization? One should say that Russia is a relatively developed country, and in most of standard socio-economic indicators, it's well above the global median. GDP per capita, Human Development Index, all of that. Well, Russia is not so bad, and even those who are critical toward Russia's socio-economic trajectory should take into account that many standards indicators, such as the share of bearers of higher education, the share of urban population and the like, is well above global median, and Russia is much better than some countries of Eastern Europe, let alone regions like Asia or Latin America. And in many ways, Russia was already modernized well before post-Soviet period. It was very, I would say, very widening part of Soviet modernization, which is not a subject matter of today's discussion. In this series of lectures, there is a number of discussions about Soviet model, so I will leave these debates to other lecturers. But I would say that starting conditions for Russia were not so bad in terms of so-called objective indicators. But we see that there is a poor quality of bureaucracy, and it is confirmed by many international comparisons using rankings from the World Bank, from Transparency International, from other agencies. Again, these indicators are far from being ideal, but anyway, if we see on consistent flaws through lenses of many indicators, we should admit that something went wrong. And certainly indicators related to property rights, rule of law, in our book there is a special chapter devoted to that, greatly deteriorated since the period of 1990s and 2000s, and from this perspective trajectory of Russia's development is hardly conducive for modernization. And also in terms of international linkages, Russia is still relatively isolated to the global economy and from flows of human capital. Well, please note that only a quarter of Russian citizens are holders of international passports, which means that they can't travel outside Russia and some nearby states. Roughly 1 of 10 Russians is able to communicate in languages other than Russian. Again, there is a huge variety across the country. Certainly in capital cities, these shares are much higher. But it means that despite a quarter century of international integration, it's still a relatively isolated country, and in terms of global economy, it is nearly the same. Of course, we first have a look on energy flows, but beyond energy, Russia's input to global economy is still relatively modest if weighted onto economic potential of the country. Yet there is another side effect of globalization, and certainly many Russians called each other via iPhones, look Hollywood movies, prefer to drive Mercedes or BMW, and send their children or grandchildren to be graduated from universities in Europe and in the United States. But still, it is a relatively isolated country despite all of that. And of course, this electoral authoritarian regime is also hardly conducive for implementation of authoritarian modernization project, because it looks like a mix of both unavoidable defects of democracy and unavoidable defects of authoritarianism. We see all matters usually discussed with regard to democracies, such as political business cycle, regular holding of elections, some sort of shy of political leaders to take unpopular decisions with regard to social policies, also problems with so-called distributional coalitions, veto players and the like, and at the same time lack of political accountability, lack of political competition. All of that is hardly conducive for modernization. And of course, since rent-seeking became a sort of major principle of governing the country, it greatly contributed to to bad governance. I will not discuss in details numerous stories of cronyism and corruption, but just to stress that it should not be considered as defect of the system of governance. Rather, it's a principal element of system of governance, and what is regarded as crony capitalism should be perceived not as a sort of illness, but rather as a normal state of affairs. And also, what is interesting for post-Soviet world that political ideas played relatively negligible role. There were numerous studies which demonstrate these effects, and I will not just repeat what has been said by scholars like Stephen Hansen or Henry Hale, but do it mean that political ideas doesn't matter at all? I would say that in any given polity there is a certain normative ideal. People, or not only representatives of society at large, but also representatives of political elites, might have certain normative perceptions of how world should like. And the problem with Russia that worldviews of post-Soviet leaders are basically retrospective. And the normative ideal is what I stated as a good Soviet Union. A system which is somehow resembled late Soviet Union, but lacked defects which were inherited for the Soviet system. The real late Soviet world was the world of shortage, the world of inefficiency, and it was annoying. But imagine the Soviet system without shortage of goods, rather than with plenty of goods, with more efficient leadership, with more efficient and more bright consumption and the like, and you will see the retrospective ideal of the Russian elite as well as a significant part of Russian society at large. Of course, retrospective worldviews are hardly unique in Russia. Yeah, just recently the United States elected president under the slogan "Make America Great Again." It's also a retrospective worldview. But my understanding is that retrospective worldviews are hardly productive for any modernization elsewhere. If you look retrospectively and try to rebuild the ideal from the past, it's not the best way to modernize anything. But it's particularly true for Russia because this normative ideal coincided with perceptions of some sort of existential threat from the West. Also, there is a phenomenon which Sergei Guriev and Daniel Treisman called as the phenomenon of information dictatorship, the regime which put extraordinary efforts on information manipulations. Of course, it's a sort of tool of dominance over its own citizens, but the problem is that it led to misperceptions among rulers as such. And of course, while after 2014 Russia shifted away from agenda of authoritarian modernization to agenda of geopolitics, this project of authoritarian modernization may be perceived as a matter of the past. But it's also good for understanding the logic of this project and why it failed. Let me just briefly outline the major problems Russia faced on the way of this authoritarian modernization. One of these problems was outlined by Huntington half century ago. He called it as King's Dilemma. Imagine that there is a ruler who would like to modernize his country, I would say his because in most of countries dictators are male. There are very few female dictators at the globe. And this ruler invested a lot of efforts into economic development, but economic development caused the rise of demand for political changes. And again, this is exactly what happens in Russia in 2011-2012. People who came to streets in Moscow and in other Russian cities were beneficiaries of modernization. Those people who greatly improved their well-being exactly because of economic growth, but at certain point they feel that they need not only economic well-being but also political freedoms. And certainly Russia's response to these demands was quite similar to those described by Huntington in many traditional monarchies. Modernization was turned away because regime faced with the threat from its own citizens. The politician's dilemma is another problem outlined by Barbara Giddens in her study of policy changes in Latin America. How rulers can improve their countries if they faced with poor quality of bureaucracy. And Geddes argued that the best way to concentrate on certain policy areas which considered to be priority areas for rulers and create certain conditions for improvement at the expense of other policy areas, or what she called as pockets of efficiency. And yet there were some pockets of efficiency in Russia, but the paradox that progress at some policy areas was achieved at the expense of abandoning or reforms or very slow progress in some other fields. The challenge of unfulfilled promises. If you have a look on some plans and programs for modernization of Russia, you will figure out that many of these plans and programs remains on the paper. There was a strategy for socio-economic development of Russia adopted in the 2000, so-called Gref program under the name of Herman Gref, then the Minister for Economic Development. 10 years or later, some experts figured out that less than half of these proposals were implemented anyhow. Half of the proposals remain on the paper, and even among those which were launched, only a quarter were achieved in full-fledged way. More recent analysis of so-called Strategy 2020, conducted by another group of economists, find out that for the new program, even less than 30% of initial proposals were implemented anyhow, and basically this program was nearly abandoned after 2014. So these great promises remain basically on the paper. I thought one should not say that they were not implemented at all, but results were very modest, to put it bluntly. And finally, what is called as the challenge of mediocrity. Mediocrity is a typical phenomenon which we faced in our everyday life. Yeah, if we compare countries with students at the class, well, probably Russia should not be regarded as a sort of F student, if we will use American scale from A to F. Russia is not F student, but also not A student. It's something like C student who is muddling through every session, but cannot improve dramatically its position in the class. The major problem for C student, maybe some of you know it, that it's very awkward. F students brought some attention. A students definitely brought some attention. But C student is something which is probably most awkward thing. And certainly it combined envy to A students, too much high self-estimates, and some sort of awkward behavior toward A students, and these misperceptions when C students believe that they are better and brighter than A students is really hardly conducive for any improvement. This phenomena was certainly observed by numerous analysts, journalists with regard to status seeking among Russia's elites and citizens at large, and it's also hardly conducive for modernization. So, to summarize, modernization was perceived by Russia's rulers as mostly a technological device for legitimation of the status quo in politics, and ideas really barely met reality. It was typical for modernization project under presidency of Dmitry Medvedev, when he posted this idea as a centerpiece of his policy program. But if we have a look on the output, we will see that actually so many promises and so few deeds and results of this modernization were very modest, like, well, basically renaming of militia to police, some cosmetic changes in other direction, some big proposals which were not implemented, and the like. Political and economic institutions. There was poor protection of property rights, lack of the rule of law, and overarching impact of some special interests, and these institutions were basically side effects of choices made by Russia's rulers. And in the end, policies which were aimed to insulation of government from public opinion and from political influence other than those from president, also not always led to success stories. And policy making, if we compare policy changes in various areas, was also rather mixed. In our book, we discussed certain policy changes, and we realized that, well, there was a real success story of tax reform, which was a top priority of President Putin during his first term, and tax reform was implemented rather quickly, brought immediately positive results, and its effect on Russia's economic development was really great. There were some mixed records in terms of reforming of school education. We focused on introduction of so-called unified state exam, the mode of examination of school graduates, which dramatically changed the whole educational landscape in the country. The reform was implemented despite numerous efforts of resistance, but its outcomes were very controversial, and reformers themselves were very critical about outcomes they achieved. Also, pension reform nearly failed because of certain compromises, as well as administrative reform, the weakest link in this program of policy changes. The question is, and it is an open question, to what extent post-Soviet achievements were made because of authoritarian modernization project, or despite to this project. And well, always half full or half empty glass. Let me just skip some of the slides and come to the conclusions. Success stories of authoritarian modernization are relatively rare because of unique set of circumstances. It should be that policy reform is a top priority of a popular and capable political leader, exactly the case of Vladimir Putin in the early 2000 period. Reformers are insulated from influence of special interest groups and able to coordinate directly with the head of the state. This was again the case of tax reform of 2000-2001. And policy changes are adopted and implemented very quickly and brought immediate positive effects. And if all these conditions are met, then we could expect that authoritarian modernization is successful in some areas despite all these major constraints I outlined. But also this is why policy reforms brought these successes relatively rarely. And it means that actually turning back to the statement that for every Lee Kuan Yew there are many Mobutus, it's not because of, not only because of leaders. Of course, there is a tendency of blaming political leaders, but it is not always because of the leader, but rather because leaders always faced with certain risks and challenges. If they go to the path of reforms too far, then these policy reforms can bring some sort of unintended consequences. And in the worst case scenario, these policy changes can come in vain, and this is exactly what happens with policy changes under Dmitry Medvedev. Of course, if we have a look on the current situation, then we will figure out that there is almost no room for authoritarian modernization project, and certainly list of priorities of Russia's rulers is very different from that. But the question is what will be next, and probably at certain point, the project of authoritarian modernization will be revived either under the same leaders or under different leaders, and the same questions, the same issues will be on political and policy agenda over and over again. And let me stop at this moment, and I will be happy to respond to questions, comments, and the like. Thank you.
I will do the moderation again. The floor is open for questions, comments. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. It was very enlightening. I have two questions. The first question relates to the political regime. You outlined at the beginning of the presentation, you placed Russia in the comparative perspective. Basically, you were saying that naming different factors why authoritarian regimes use economic growth as some kind of factor of supporting the survival of regimes. I'm interested in the question, what do you think about the perspective of breakdown of political regimes? Because also there are a lot of different studies focused on Latin America that show that if the economic growth is not strong enough, it leads to the breakdown of regimes. Russian economic growth has declined over the last years, and I'm sure that a lot of people feel the consequences of this decline. why the regime has not break down, or do you think, see any perspective? Or probably the economic growth is not that important for the survival of regime. And the second question is also relates to the comparative research that showed the survival of dictatorships. I'm referring to the current book by Ezra. That said that survival of authoritarian regimes relates on the relation between leadership and elites. And here I'm interested in your opinion about the most current developments with the former Minister of Economic Development that was basically put out of his office and brought into prison. What do you think, whether it shows some kind of changes or cleavages inside the ruling elite in Russia?
We'll try to keep it a little bit outside. First and foremost, when we are talking about economic effects of growth and decline, we should take into account the magnitude of changes. I attempted, but not found in my computer, the excellent picture produced by one of my colleagues. There is a graph which demonstrated the dynamics of real income of Russians since 2000. The picture is the following. From 2000 till 2014, the real income grows more than 2 times for an average person. Over the last 3 years, there was a decline of basically 15%. Which means that the decline was relatively little vis-à-vis what happens with the economic growth. And it was little not only in terms of scope, but also in terms of time. Of course, there is no guarantee that over time trends will be different and people will become more and more angry and will be encouraged to protest against the regime. As of yet, we do not observe such an effect. But it's also a matter of what is more dangerous for the regime. If there is a slow but steady recession, or if there is a very severe one-off decline. And there is no answer even in comparative literature, because nobody knows how regimes respond to both effects. My understanding is that if there will be some sort of protracted stagnation, it will be probably not much an issue for the regime. However, if there will be a kind of sharp and very deep recession, then it may be really a danger. But as of yet, there is no sign of any sort of major recession comparable with those of the 1990s. This was a deep and protracted recession with the decline of output for more than 20% over 9 years. Still, even at that time, the magnitude of socio-economic protests was fairly limited. And I really doubt that we should expect somewhat comparable perspective unless there will be some sort of exogenous shocks. As to political elite and its cohesion, my understanding is that, again, as of yet, we do not observe some sort of major breakdowns within the ruling coalition. Yeah, there are some sort of victims of struggle for rents, and certainly the former Minister of Economic Development, Ulyukayev, became one of these victims. He is not the only, but probably one of the most visible persons. But my understanding that things like that not resulted in some sort of disequilibrium of the regime. Again, I would not exclude that there will be some sort of major divisions, but as of yet there is no evidence of open disagreements or open conflicts, other than conflicts over rents, which are very natural because the pool of rents somewhat diminished because of recent economic stagnation.
Thank you very much for your lecture. Actually, I have only one question. As far as we know, all previous, maybe 3 historic modernizations of Russia were conducted in a very authoritarian way. Is there any room for establishing or recreation of institutions in the effective way under maybe authoritarian or empty dictatorial rule in Russia? Is there any opportunity to modernize within this framework nowadays? Thank you very much.
Mm. Yeah, from where a benevolent dictator could come, yeah, some sort of Russian version of Lee Kuan Yew or Park Chung-hee or whoever else. It's a good question because actually even the reform-minded leader is not free to do what he wants. One might say that in early 2000s, Vladimir Putin reminded some of these leaders. He was really devoted to socio-economic development and progress. He set up the goal that Russia should overtake Portugal in terms of GDP per capita. And actually Russia overtake Portugal in terms of GDP per capita, but not much because of Russia's growth, but rather because of Portuguese decline. And he initiated a number of policy reforms. He was a genuine supporter of this Gref's program. And at least until 2004-2005, these reforms were conducted in more or less the way proposed by the team led by Gref, Kudrin and other policy reformers. However, many of these efforts were halfway or stopped or reversed. Probably the crucial moment happens when reform went beyond the field of public finance, taxes, budgets, and went into the field of social policies. First major failure was pension reform. It came to a compromise which actually buried any reform. Putin himself attempted to be a mediator between two groups, one of which requested some sort of increase of payments, increasing of retirement age and the like for the sake of well-being for the further generations. And another group preferred status quo. Why this compromise was impossible? You can't combine both goals at once. You have to choose. But this choice is very tough. This is the choice for further generations, which will bring positive effects in at best 10 to 15 years. But there will be short-term losses for businesses, for ordinary people, and the like. Certainly, Putin not much interested in pursuing these goals. He was insensitive to what will happen in 10 to 15 years. And he preferred basically preservation of the status quo. Negative effects of these choices we're observing right now because of the gradual decline of pensions for many people about the retirement age who were much younger 15 years ago. This is the logic of policy changes which every ruler faced. And the paradox that many post-Soviet rulers pursued pension reforms, ranging from Nazarbayev in Kazakhstan to, you may be surprised, Mr. Yanukovych in Ukraine. While Mr. Putin, who was initially pro-reform, shifted to the preservation of the status quo. Why? Not because he was against the pension reform, but rather because he understands that it will be quite unpopular before the next elections, and certainly he would like to get more votes, and unpopular decisions are not so nice when everything is okay. Even more challenging was another part of social policy reform, with so-called monetization of social benefits. It was the failure of implementation. The implementation was conducted rather poorly. The responsibility was divided between various agencies and the like. Again, the government responded in a very primitive way. It poured more money to appease angry pensioners, but after that, all reforms were stopped. Even the term reform became a taboo among government officials, according to some sources. So when we turn from macro analysis, why reformers pursue some reforms or not, to micro analysis, we see how many factors affect the choice for or against this authoritarian modernization. And this is why even initially reform-minded leader decided that, well, things are going on well, why we should pursue further changes. And since 2005, even the word reform disappeared from the public discourse of Russia's authorities.
I have a question concerning what you said, that one model is these pockets of efficiency. And in your lecture you said that there was at least one very successful and very efficient reform. This was the tax reform. I'm a lawyer, so I can sort of confirm that if you look into tax law, you even have a sort of rule of law situation in tax law. I mean, not if you are Yugos and Khodorkovsky, but of course, basically, the Constitutional Court is quite sort of careful with what it does, etc. So the interesting question is, why was tax law rather successful? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks for your question. Actually, tax reform was really successful in Russia, but I would say that tax reforms were successful in many post-communist countries. There is an excellent book by Hilary Appel, who analyzed tax reforms in Eastern Europe, including Russia, including Czech Republic, including some other countries. My understanding is that in case of Russia, there was a good combination of common understanding of need of reforms, but also lack of anti-reform coalition. Every interest group attacked the proposal of tax code from different angles of view. Like oil companies objected subsoil use tax, which was an invention of reformers. Finally, they proposed a compromise. Subsoil use tax will be taken only if oil price will be not below certain threshold. Actually, oil prices went up immediately after this threshold was introduced, but there was no way to raise this threshold. Left-wing parties, communist including, attacked flat rate income tax. But again, other actors were more or less insensitive to flat rate tax. Regional elites were against some other elements of this proposal, but there was no unified anti-reform coalition. And Kudrin and Gref effectively used divide and rule tactics in bargaining with all of the proposals, but at the same time, they had very close connections with Vladimir Putin. They approached him even without notifying of then Prime Minister Kasyanov, and put their proposals not through official channels of discussion and coordination between various ministries, agencies and the like, but rather getting their direct access to Putin to persuade him that their proposal is the best. It was a risky strategy, but this strategy brought almost immediate success. The tax code was approved in the 2000. Already in 2001, it brought some 1% of GDP growth simply because of reduction of many taxes and increasing of tax collection rate. Tax collection rate greatly improved, and therefore Kudrin used us as a major argument. See what happens when we introduce the reform. All reform opponents had no chance to object these real achievements. And because of this sort of informal alliance, then the next step was made in terms of building of stabilization fund and many other updates to this reform of the tax system. So it was basically politics, but this politics brought some sort of immediate benefits, and therefore the equilibrium was reached. Yes, well, there were many, how to say, abuses of tax law, and UCAS affair is probably most well-known example, not the only. But overall, judging by experience of other reforms, tax reform was really a success story, and I would say that Russia, not only Russia's rulers benefited from that, of course they benefited, but Russia benefited, Russian economy benefited from that, and I believe that it was quite unique example if we compare this policy area with others.
So this was the success of the reform, but now we are in 2017, and the tax system, despite all those abuses, etc., is still working. So why is it still working? So my question is, so maybe it is still working because the people in power understand that if you want to milk a cow, you should not kill a cow. You should not kill it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If once whatever reform brought some positive results, certainly it will be very risky to change. I would not say that it's once and forever. Actually, the government now discussed the problem of changing the tax system, increasing the rate of VAT or other taxes because of problems with the state finances. But at the same time, there is no sort of immediate threats. Rather, there are problems with reserves, with stabilization funds, or now there is a division between two funds. That's true. To what extent these further changes will be radical, or rather, not destroy the system established in 2000 is remain to be seen. I will respond to the set of questions.
So basically you state that tax reform still remains to be a success, but actually, is it true just because lots of people can publicly state in Russia that they do not pay any taxes at all, and it's quite common to avoid taxes? Can we measure? Can we basically say that the tax reform is still successful in this case? I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll collect.
I'm confused about this term of modernization, maybe because I'm not an economist. Could you give us some examples of economic policies that would modernize the Russian economy? This is the first question. And second, how would you describe the current economic politics in Russia? What type of it? And maybe you can name another country that has similar economic politics. Thank you.
Yeah, the term modernization, of course, not related to economic policy only, but you are quite right. Economic issues are in the heart of modernization. Certainly, there were several policies aimed to economic growth and development. We discussed tax policies. This is one of the elements, but not the only. Certainly, the government established currency reserves, and it was quite wise given the troubles Russia faced during 2008 economic crisis, and more recently with decline of global oil prices. Also, the government attempted to pursue certain industrial policies. We have in the book I mentioned a chapter about some sort of policies aimed to high-tech development. Some of them were more successful, some of them were less successful, but actually there were certain achievements, more modest than one might expect. There was a big part of state modernization is military reform. We're not focused on these issues in our book, but I would say that military is greatly modernized during the 2000s. The military was downsized, became more professional, more capable, and the like. So one should not underestimate efforts Russia put onto this front. So there were some achievements, but there were also shortcomings, and social policies were under-reformed. Administrative reform was the greatest failure of these changes, and basically there were no incentives for improvement of quality of bureaucratic apparatus and operation of street-level bureaucracy. So there were also some shortcomings. As to the question on tax evasion, I would say that in comparative terms, tax evasion greatly decreased. If you would compare Russia in the 1990s, when tax evasion became a sort of common practice, I mean both by individuals and by companies, the degree of tax evasion in Russia now is much less. But at the same time, we have huge loopholes. Basically, related with big companies which operate through numerous non-transparent operations. And there was a question regarding Mr. Ulukayev. Actually, the deal of privatization of shares of biggest Russian oil company, Rosneft, came through exactly the same some sort of shadow mechanism which Mr. Ulukayev openly opposed, and he became a victim. These, well, some sort of national champions operated in really non-transparent schemes, and all statements about tax evasion are quite relevant. But at the same time, if you have a look not on these companies, but on most of Russia's businesses, they have less opportunities for tax evasion, and the degree of tax collection greatly improved over the period of 2000s. Again, these companies are exceptional, but they were exceptional in the 1990s as well.
I have another kind of question. You spoke about authoritarian modernization in Russia at national level. I want to ask you, how important is the subnational level, or more precisely the local level, for the Russian regime's ability to modernize and adapt to current challenges?
Yeah, subnational dimension is decisively important, and certainly today I spoke basically about Russia as a whole without focusing on regional variations. Regional variations are great, and certainly there were some attempts of regional development and economic growth basically pursued by some sort of progressive subnational leaders, or by certain policies by the federal government, which well, selected certain regions, invested money to these areas through special federal programs and the like. This was a huge discussion about that during the 2000s. The problem with that is that there is a sort of division of labor. The federal government transferred many responsibilities for social policies onto the shoulders of regional leaders. This was especially true since 2012, when Putin requested that regional leaders should be responsible for achieving certain indicators in terms of well-being of public employees and other social developments. But the problem is that this mechanism could work effectively only if there is a sort of nationwide economic growth. And therefore, federal government could inject more money onto regional budgets. Now the situation is quite reverse. There is a, well, at best, zero economic growth. Some people argue that it will be some very sluggish economic growth this year, but still the federal government have no money to inject to regional budgets. And therefore, regional leaders are in very awkward positions. They could not invest a lot of money for regional development programs. They have to fulfill promises made by the federal president. And therefore, the list of regions with some hopes for progress is very limited. Of course, there are some regions of very special status. Chechnya is most well-known example. But these are exceptions that prove the rule. That's it. Thank you.
You have started so quickly with your answering that I couldn't place my question. I would go back to a more broader question. Maybe you can quickly answer this. When we look at the literature, one term pops up quite often, increasingly, Putinism. And there's a thesis that there's an increasing personalization of power, so focus on Putin as a person. When we listen to you, then you still describe the elite as a coalition, changing coalition, informal bargaining between different types of interests and political ideas. What do you think about this term, Putinism? And do you see a personalization of power increasingly? Is this okay for you?
Yeah, there is a personalization, and I would say that, of course, Russia is not unique. In every regime of that type, we focus on leadership first. And certainly leadership is outstandingly important because, even if we have a look on recent Russia's history, we see how much depends upon personal priorities of political leaders, not only present-day leaders, but leaders of the past with regard to past attempts of modernization and the like. The point is that we should not put all the blames or all the credits to Putin. It would be misleading because leaders rarely do anything alone. There are some influential policymakers who affect certain priorities of the agenda. And if we are talking about socio-economic modernization, I wouldn't say that Putin rely only upon some sort of cronies and dacha friends and the like. Many people who are in charge of socio-economic development of the country, they are quite well qualified experts who clearly understand what to do, what is necessary, and the like. The problem is what is a priority list. And the list of priorities for socio-economic development was clearly observed in the early 2000s. It was even stated in 2012 when Putin returned back to his presidency. He offered a broad program of policy initiatives, which were prepared basically by the same people who were in charge of elaboration of 2000 proposal of Gref strategy. The problem is that at a certain point he just abandoned this program. Well, literally or figuratively put it into the trash can and shifted the whole direction of socio-economic development of the country into a very different trajectory. And that's the basic risk of any sort of authoritarian modernization in a personalist regime. Yeah, for whatever reason, the leader decided that international agenda, geopolitical influence, and the like is more important than well-being of the country. Well, but Putin is not alone. At the global scale, there are so many rulers who behave in the same way.